Hi, welcome back to another video. This video is titled Taken from the Quarry, and it's named that for a particular reason, because I'm focusing on a piece of ritual which I found in the second section of the first lecture, which starts off talking about the reason why a Mason is divested of metals before he enters into the lodge room. And then it goes into the creation of the construction of King Solomon's temple and mentions about there being no metal tools in the construction. And it's a really curious piece of ritual. And while I was looking through this some years ago, I made a discovery which was so wow that I just really would love to share it with everyone. Because once you see what I saw, there can be no mistaking that everything has been placed in this ritual for a particular purpose and for a particular reason, and there's no coincidence that certain words are in there. And especially once you unlock the code within this ritual, it's revelatory. I can't wait to show you. Let me get started. So this is taken from the second section of the first lecture. It starts off by asking, why were you divested of metal? That I might bring nothing offensive or defensive into the lodge to disturb its harmony. The second reason, as I was received into Masonry in a state of poverty, it was to remind me to relieve indigent brethren, knowing them to be worthy without detriment to myself or connections. A third reason, at the building of King Solomon's temple, there was not heard the sound of metal tools. How could the building of so stately an edifice as King Solomon's temple have been carried on and completed without the aid of metal tools? The stones were hewn in the quarry, there squared, carved, marked, and numbered. The timber was felled and prepared in the forest of Lebanon, carved, marked, and numbered also. They were then floated to Joppa, thence conveyed on carriages to Jerusalem, and there set up with wooden mauls and implements prepared for that purpose. Why were the stones and timber prepared so far off? To show the excellence of the craft in those days, for although the materials were prepared at so great a distance, yet when they were brought to Jerusalem and came to be put together, each piece fitted to that exact nicety that it appeared more like the work of the great architect of the universe than of human hands. So, as you can see, it's a very elusive piece of ritual. It's clearly talking about something allegorical, because the question, which is, how can such a stately edifice as King Solomon's temple be carried on and completed without the aid of metal tools? It's a very good question, because if you're treating the Bible literally, and I wouldn't suggest you should do, but let's just say, playing devil's advocate, you treated the Bible literally, then King Solomon's temple, for all the historians that have analysed the Bible and ascertained when certain events may have occurred in the timeline, in a historical timeline, then the building of King Solomon's temple has been attributed, I think it's been identified as being about 1000 to 900 BC. Now, even at that time, it would have been unheard of to have built any building, especially a temple like King Solomon's temple, without the aid of metal tools. So right from the off, it's clearly talking about something allegorical rather than literal, because it's impossible to build a temple literally without the aid of metal tools. So then it warrants a deeper look into what certain words mean, what the main characters are in this piece of ritual, and how we might be able to piece it all together. So just before I go into the ritual, when talking about being divested of metal, a lot of Masons just gloss over this point and they don't consider its spiritual meaning. In relation to metal itself, of course, you can have base metals and elements which don't require any embellishment or change. But this is more talking about metal which has been worked on, like tools, like armory, for instance, a knife or a sword or something that can do injury. Or it could be talking about jewels, jewelry. And all of that signifies possession, something of personal worth that you would hold on to and attribute value to in a material sense. So the reason for not taking it inside the temple, if you're looking in a deeper way what a temple represents, you wouldn't be associating your personal belongings and possessions. You wouldn't be looking at that when trying to do deeper work within. Because the whole notion, as far as I'm concerned, about Masonry, the whole notion, the whole reason for its being, is to allow one to explore deeper than the personal, to find that God essence within. And one can only do that by discarding all of the personal material worth in the quest for what is truly of wealth in a spiritual sense. So that's the reason why we must leave all outside concerns, material concerns, possessions, personal worth, all of that outside the lodge when engaged in something deeper. And to put it in a very practical sense, imagine you're sitting down to meditate. Well, if you're engaged in meditation with a view to exploring a deeper reality within you, then the last thing that you should be doing is focusing on anything of the material world. You are to let go of that in order to find what's deeper. You're not really going to achieve any results if you're going to be holding on to something of an egoic personal nature. So in essence, in my view, that's what this is getting at. But the paragraph which has the most wealth that I've seen arguably anywhere in the lectures, although that is quite a tall order because the lectures are jam-packed full of allegory and symbolism, and it's just a world of exploration. But it's this paragraph here. The stones were hewn in the quarry, there squared, carved, marked, and numbered. The timber was felled and prepared in the forest of Lebanon, carved, marked, and numbered also. They were then floated to Joppa, thence conveyed on carriages to Jerusalem, and there set up with wooden walls and implements prepared for that purpose. So in the process of esoteric interpretation, looking deeper into this, I initially made a beeline for the three main characters or three main things that fall within that piece of ritual, within that paragraph. That would be the stones, the quarry, and timber. They're the three main elements that are mentioned in this paragraph, in my view. And those three hold a very significant meaning. Let's look at quarry first of all, because apparently the stones were taken that were hewn in the quarry. So looking at a quarry is essentially the earth from which stone is taken. Now, it's hard to identify the extent of a quarry. It's pretty much ubiquitous. Or you could say it has a particular delineation in respect of the materials within it, like, for instance, a particular type of limestone rock or something. But in essence, it's essentially the earth. And if you're standing on the earth, it just seems to go on ad infinitum. So it's allegorically, or at least symbolically, representative of something that has no beginning and has no end. It's everywhere. So if that's the first thing in this paragraph, the quarry, then you have the stones, and then you have timber. And it makes me think of, if you look at these two elements, stones and timber, in terms of their temporal qualities, over time, stone long outlives wood. It long outlives. So let's say you were building two structures, one made of timber, or made of wood, I should say, one made of wood and one made of stone. Guaranteed 100%, the stone building will long outlast the timber. And also, temples of old, or certain temples, they were adorned with wooden carvings. Not all of them, but some of them. And if you go visit certain of these temples, you won't see the wood carvings. You just see the stone that lasts long after the timber has perished. You can liken that to the body and the skeleton in a sort of more material sense, but you can. Like, for instance, the flesh will perish long before the skeleton will. So you can look at it like that, in that sort of notion. You can also liken it to the three who rule a lodge: the worshipper master, the senior warden, and the junior warden. And I'll explain as follows. Looking at the etymology of the word quarry, something wonderful can be found. Quarry, etymologically, comes from the Latin word quadrum, which is a square. I mean, the moment I saw that, it was just wow. Because there can be no coincidence that the word quarry has been used in this instance. A square. Quadrum, a square. And from quadrum came carrier, which is Old French, which now has been translated to carré. That's the French now. But medieval Latin, it was quareria, and Middle English became quarry. So that's the derivation of the word quarry, but the root of it is a square. And let's look at which officer in that trinity, in the worship master, junior warden, senior warden, in that trinity, who has the square? The worship master. So right from the off, you can see that everything started with the square, and from there came the stone, and thereafter was the timber. So, for instance, already I'm looking at this in a way that the quarry represents the worshipful master, the stones represent something that came just from the worshipful master, so the senior warden, just like the soul, and the junior warden, representative of the timber. And the reason I'm liking the stones to the senior warden and the timber to the junior warden is because, going back to the analogy of stones long outlasting timber, stones can be likened to something that is of a permanent quality. So just like the soul is eternal, whereas the bodies within which the soul inhabit are perishable, temporal, just like timber. So that clearly speaks to me on that level, because you're looking at the three who rule a lodge. Let's look at the paragraph in a bit more detail. If you are looking at it somewhat in a literal sense, but not going too far, but in a literal sense, going back to 900 to 1,000 years BC, I did some investigating as to where would the quarry have been? If they were taking stones from a quarry, where would it have been in Israel, or in those days, Kingdom of Judah or Kingdom of Israel? And my researchers have led me to discover that it's from Zedekiah's cave, otherwise known as King Solomon's Quarry. Now, that falls slap bang in the center of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem being the center of Israel and the quarry being in the center of Jerusalem, you can't be more central. That literally is the center of Israel. Now, Jerusalem has it has connotations of the spiritual center of being. So if you're looking at the quarry being right at the center, again has a relevance or resonates on the level of worshipful master. Now, looking at the map of Israel, you can see these locations marked on the map, and something very interesting happens when you follow it. And I'll go through it with you as we go through this, as I'm going through the interpretation. So the stones, they were hewn in the quarry. That would be in the center of Jerusalem. They're squared, carved, marked, and numbered. Now, it's saying they're squared, carved, marked, and numbered. The moment they were hewn, it says squared. In essence, it has the same essence of the quarry. Squared being of the same essence of the quarry, just as the soul is the same essence of the divine. Carved, marked, and numbers signify individuality, uniqueness. Once something comes into existence, it has uniqueness, it has individuality. To use an example, let's use the ocean, can be likened to the quarry. So the ocean is kind of ubiquitous. The water in the ocean is the ocean. The moment that you dip a glass into the ocean and draw the water out, that water has identification. It has individuality. It has substance. You can identify it. Just like this. If you take a stone from a quarry, they're squared, so it has the same essence, just like water is the same essence of the ocean. But carved, marked, and numbered means it's delineated, it's given a number, it's brought into being, into existence, just like the water has identification once it's in the glass. Then the next sentence goes on to this. It says, the timber was felled and prepared in the forest of Lebanon. Well, first of all, timber being wood, felled representative of the fall of man or the fall of soul. In other words, when the soul was totally overly preoccupied with the material realm, it fell to earth, just like you see references to Lucifer as the light bearer falling from grace, falling from heaven, or the notion of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and bringing it down to mankind. Same analogy, same story, the same notion. Timber was felled and prepared in the forest of Lebanon. Now let's look at the map again. So this is Israel. Look where Lebanon is in relation to Israel. It's north. Now, any reference to something of a northerly direction signifies darkness, signifies ignorance, and signifies the material realm. So again, you can relate Lebanon as the material realm, timber being representative of the junior warden, our outward face, and felled means fallen to earth. And it says carved, marked, and numbered also. Of course it has been. Just as when you are born, or when a baby is born, that soul which already has identification, has identity, it is infused within that body of the baby, and that baby is given identification, it's given a name, it's given personality, etc. Notice how it doesn't say squared. Not at that stage, because the moment that timber was felled, fallen to earth, it needs to get back up to an original position in order to get it in line with its original nature. So it's not going to be squared at that point. It has to be squared much later down the line. Just like a rough ashlar needs to be smoothed off and made perfectly square, in order for it to be presented up to the divine as a perfect offering. I use another phrase for you to show that you can be the best version of oneself. Then it says, they were then floated to Joppa. Well, look at the direction here. South. Now, Joppa is an old name for Jaffa. Jaffa is the more modern name. It's just next to Tel Aviv. Been there many times. Beautiful old city. Joppa is, as you can see, it's on the west coast of Israel, just next to the Mediterranean. And in order to have got there from Lebanon, you had to have gone south. And it says, thence conveyed on carriages to Jerusalem. So you're in the west, and now you need to move to the east to go to Jerusalem. So let's see if you can recognize the direction that has been traveled. You start in the center. You go to Lebanon. You go back down to Joppa. You find yourself in the west, and you have to travel east. Can you see what it's made? I found that revelatory. It was a wow moment for me, because there can be no coincidence that these places have been mentioned in this paragraph, and they have directional relevance. There's a lot more to talk about within this paragraph, a hell of a lot more. But I thought that was very important to show you. What else can we talk about before we wrap this up? We could say, why were the stones and timber prepared so far off? To show the excellence of the craft in those days, for although the materials were prepared at so great a distance, yet when they were brought to Jerusalem and came to be put together, each piece fitted to that exact nicety that it appeared more like the work of the great architect of the universe than of human hands. In other words, if you get your material sense of self, your personal sense of self, in line with the soul, if you are resonating on the same level, or another phrase that I like to use, if all of your relevant aspects of being are all in alignment with the center, then your outward face will be a perfect representation of the divine essence within. And you'll know what I'm talking about if you've ever met people who you sense are spiritual in nature. You can see that they emanate this divine essence from them. That's because, as you can see here, it appears that their outward face is more like God than human, just like there's a notion about the Christian master, the name Jesus, if that was ever his name, having risen from the dead, but not being recognized as his physical form. The same sort of notion is there, in my view. It's about being one with, at, and of the center. And the moment that happens, those that continue to see the existence from an egoic perspective will not recognize you. I say to many people, this journey of self-initiation towards mastership is not for the faint-hearted. It's not an easy path by any stretch. It's meant to be difficult. And you are likely to lose many friends, or those that you regarded as friends, along the way. You're likely to lose those who you have held and regarded most dear in your life. They will either turn against you, or they will shun you, or they'll just leave you alone. Now, that's through no fault of your own. It's because they no longer recognize you as the version that they want of you. You don't need to play by their rules anymore. The moment you start waking up, you start to be who you are meant to be. And you don't need to play by others' rules. I'm not suggesting being a lawbreaker by any stretch. I'm just saying that you then follow the inner voice, that still silent voice within, rather than the voice without. So on that note, I want to thank you very much for listening. If you liked the video, please give a like. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe. and ding the bell for notifications of any further videos. Okay, thank you for watching. Goodbye.